Buying your first luxury timepiece is really exciting, and this can be a great process, but it can also be the step that collectors and first entrants and buyers make that creates absolute distaste and regret. And I think the first purchase really often shapes what your collection will look like in the future, and also certain values and goals and things that you would need to think about going forward if you put the proper planning in beforehand and have a proper understanding of why you're purchasing the timepiece. So in this video, I really want to just focus on outlining the rational framework behind buying your first luxury watch. So the first section is just about defining the purpose for your purchase, and I like to just call it your why. So will this piece be for daily wear? Is it going to be something that you go to work with, that you don't mind getting dings and scratches on? Or is this going to be a milestone piece, like for an engagement, a wedding, a birthday, anniversary, or the completion of a significant period of your life, like passing your university degree exams or whatever? Will there be brand aspirations involved with that decision-making process? So do you want to only focus on a specific brand with that purchase, or are you open to experience? And then, or experience different brands, sorry. Then what's the entry point that you're coming in at? So basically, what is your price budget bracket, and what experience are you coming in at? Are you a well-versed collector? Have you traded a lot? Or are you new in the luxury watch game? And then, are you buying for value preservation, which a lot of people want to do, but I'll explain a little bit later why that's not my first recommendation. So without really having a clarity of purpose, and this is the takeaway from this part, is buyers will easily be influenced by hype, high pressure, trend cycles that they can't read or understand because they don't work the industry, and really think through why they actually need to buy a watch in the first place. So just something to keep in mind there. Then the most important thing, I think, should be a consideration for every single person buying any watch, regardless of a first purchaser. But someone that's buying their first watch is having a rational budget. Don't overextend yourself, don't spend too much. And there's a few factors to think about within this budget. And the first is acquisition costs, which would be basically your purchase price, and then servicing costs, which are your maintenance costs. And I tie these two together because my opinion is you shouldn't buy a watch if you're not willing to maintain it. And this isn't just because I've got interest in a watchmaking business, so I'm trying to sell that side of the business. Well, I am, but because it makes sense to do so. You aren't going to buy a vehicle and drive the car for 10 years without servicing. I hope you are not going to do that. And quite frankly, the car will probably not drive before that extended period lapses. So the same thing with a watch. It needs lubrication, it needs attention, it probably needs new parts, replaced parts. There's certain generic things that always need replacement after a certain amount of time or years, and that also depends on how you wear it and the conditions within which you wear a watch. So you have to link the acquisition cost with servicing costs. Then insurance. This is a very personal decision that you need to make, but I would say if you're not buying a really high value item as your first purchase, only really start insuring your collection once there's some value attached to it, and don't just be too scared to extend yourself and pay for the insurance fees immediately and not really knowing why, because you could be insuring something that's worth nothing. And it's fine to own a watch that's not worth anything because it could be something of value later on. So the other element with this rational budget issue is the opportunity cost. And it's not so much a pocket-based or monetary issue, it's mainly a you issue. So with buying a specific watch, especially as a first-time purchaser, you will have opportunities. You'll have tons of watches available regardless of the budget that you've got to spend on them. And opportunity cost is really what you are going to be sacrificing for one purchase versus another. But a key takeaway here is do not take food off your table. Don't decrease your general well-being with your watch purchase. That's just not how this works. And then avoiding, tied into that, this financial stretch. So don't overextend yourself once again, and don't over budget and go into debt for a watch. Bad idea. So really key here is that luxury should not undermine liquidity or create unnecessary pressure on you to purchase the watch. Just stick to your values, stick to what you know, stick to what you don't know. Sorry, don't stick to what you don't know, because that's just going to cause a lot of grief and a lot of regret with that purchase. So then it's important for you to just understand the brands and the history and the model literacy behind the brand or the watch that you are buying. Brief history, Google search, go onto the website, find out what servicing costs are, what maintenance costs are, email their info domain, find out about the different models, how accessible each one is. These are easy things anyone can do. And then understanding the retail versus secondary market with your first purchase is important, because it's going to really make and play a big impact on your price that you are willing to spend, and what you will actually end up spending at the end of the day. And I'm not going to elaborate about this, but what I will do is I'll drop a link to my previous video where I really expanded on the difference between the secondary market and the primary, but mainly focused on all the aspects and factors within the secondary watch market, so you can really get a good idea of what that would look like there. But key things here are buying new versus pre-owned, waiting lists, warranty considerations, and then the entry point that you are coming in at. Then the most common mistakes that are made, and the ones that you should avoid, is buying when you're under pressure, buying fast, meaning just no decision making involved, buying because it's out of impulse, buying hype models, really bad idea, ignoring the wearability of the watch, really important, because if the watch doesn't wear well, if it's not comfortable, it's either too big or too small, or it just isn't the right shape, you are not going to wear it, and as a result, bad investment, bad purchase. And then neglecting servicing realities. Understand what you need to pay to maintain something. If you've made that commitment, like I suggested, to pay the purchase price with this idea of the servicing costs included, understand what they actually are, because certain luxury brands have got extensive servicing costs involved, but there's a lot of reasoning behind that, and perhaps I'll unpack that in a future video. And then the closing take here, and this video isn't long, but it's just something for you to consider, is that your first luxury watch should be about you. It should be what you actually want to buy. I would say, if it's your first time buying a watch, buy something that's not necessarily got a lot of investment value or secondary market value if you just want to wear the timepiece. If you don't understand watches yet, but you really love a certain watch and you can afford it, and you feel that that's your way to start, great. And I would say do it, because if you're buying something that you aren't able to wear or not going to wear, it will just end up sitting in a safe, gathering dust, and you'd have wasted that money anyway. So I'd say the first watch you buy, regardless of price, well, within your budget, but regardless of this idea of the hype model and investment value and future investment value, just buy something that you want to wear and take it from there. It's going to motivate you, and it's going to help you understand the market as a whole.